Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Innocent Bystander YouTube channel. Today is actually supposed to be about the NFL and the trade deadline. As you can see, I'm wearing an NFL jersey. Probably the most random NFL jersey I or anyone else has in their closet. It's Jordan Howard on the Bears. Not sure why I own a Jordan Howard Bears jersey, but there were still tags on it when I saw it in the closet as I was looking through jerseys, and I figured, you know what, this one's kind of topical for the video because, well, the Bears made two trades. Anyways, in a weird way, the NBA kind of ties into this because the NFL on trade deadline day a few days ago turned into the NBA because there were about 15 trades in one day, and that never happens in the NFL because, well, the trade deadline is usually underwhelming. But this season, it decided to be as crazy as the NBA trade deadline. So we got a lot to talk about. We got a lot of trades to dive into, and why waste any more time? Let's get into it. All right, so first of all, let's talk about the moves that happened prior to the deadline. We'll grade those too. We'll talk about those a little bit as well. And the first one, and probably the biggest one of the entire trade deadline, honestly, the best player that was moved was Christian McCaffrey, and he was traded to the San Francisco 49ers from the Carolina Panthers. And we'll take these side by side, not going to jumbo it all together and make it super confusing for anybody. But yeah, so the Panthers receive a second-round pick, a third-round pick, and a fourth-round pick in 2023, and a fifth-round pick in 2024. So I graded this an A- for the Panthers, and my reason being that I didn't think there was any shot that they would receive this much compensation without covering most of the contract. While they did cover some of the contract, for a $16 million a year running back that is coming off 2 seasons where he was marred by injuries, and he's still a high usage running back, especially in San Francisco where running backs always seem to get injured and they drop like flies. It's kind of scary, but we saw what Christian McCaffrey is capable of doing in San Fran in his first game. But as for the Panthers side of things, you did get a lot of draft compensation, like I said. And I mean, you ate some of the contract, but for a 26-year-old injury-prone running back, a 2, a 3, and a 4 this season, and then a 5 next season, pretty good draft compensation. As for the 49ers, obviously you got Christian McCaffrey, and even though you gave up a bunch of draft compensation, you're a Super Bowl team. I gave it an A. He fits the Shanahan system, which is a lot of outside zone running, and obviously he's the best pass-catching back they've had, and he's the best pass-catching back in the league for that matter. And obviously, like I said, Game 1, we saw what he's capable of. He had the holy trinity of touchdowns as he passed for 1, caught 1, and ran for 1. So Christian McCaffrey is a dominant force when he's healthy. We know this. He's a game changer, and a defense has to completely change their game plan based on facing him. He will absolutely help Jimmy Garoppolo, which is probably the biggest thing for them, as a dump-off can turn into 15 to 20 yards, as it can with Deebo Samuel. The possibilities are honestly endless for that offense. So it'll be a lot of fun to watch as he continues getting acclimated to the playbook and the system, and it should be a lot of fun to watch. The second trade was Robert Quinn to the Eagles, and we'll talk about the Bears side first, as they received a fourth-round pick in 2023. I gave it a B. Because it didn't really blow me away in any way. He's a free agent after the season, and, well, they're in tank mode. If you couldn't tell, the Bears are a really bad football team, and while they may be 3-5, 3-6, whatever the hell it is, they aren't exactly a good football team. So to get a fourth-round pick for a guy that's going to be a free agent and hasn't played up to his standards, granted, he has faced some of the most double teams in the entire league because there really isn't another pass rusher there in Chicago. It was a great move for the Bears to get anything, but I thought that there was maybe a chance that you could have gotten a little more, and what the fuck do I know? I'm not plugged into the NFL, but a fourth-round pick for a pretty damn good edge rusher still, who came off a season where he had, I believe, 17 or 18 sacks last year. I thought there was maybe a shot you could have got more. As for the Eagles, they obviously got Robert Quinn. And I gave this an A- because, well, as I said, Quinn may not be having his best season, but now all the pressure's gone. You're not the best pass rusher on that team. You might not even be the second best pass rusher on that team, as for this season at least. But the Eagles, once again, made a great move, and it seems like it's a string of great moves over and over and over again to build what is the most complete roster in the NFL. And they have probably the most feared pass rush top to bottom in the entire league because they will continue coming at you in waves. And as you can see, the Eagles have absolutely prioritized the trenches, and Robert Quinn only adds to that. It's an A- because, well, you're a Super Bowl team and you somehow got even stronger for very limited draft capital. And the last pre-deadline move that I'm going to talk about was my Giants trading Kadarius Toney to the Chiefs. Now, as for the Giants, I gave this a B+. The only reason I didn't give this higher was because of the possibility of Toney being a stud, because we've seen it in the past. He's very capable of being that great player, creating after the catch and getting wide open on a lot of passes and even making some contested grabs as well. Toney's got crazy potential, and we know that. And obviously the Giants really do need a weapon right now because Darius Slayton's essentially our number one wide receiver alongside Wan'Dale Robinson. That's really not a very inspiring group, as for right now at least. But aside from that, when you look at what we got and what realistically a lot of people thought we were going to get, which was no more than a 5th or 6th round pick, we got a 3 and a third round pick and a 6th round pick, both in this year's draft. So to get that much for a guy that wasn't even on the field and wasn't drafted by this regime, essentially you're looking at it as Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll essentially got a 3rd and a 6th for nothing, because it really was nothing to this regime and really was nothing for us on the field thus far in the season. As for the Chiefs, obviously they received Kadarius Toney. And, okay, I gave this a C. And I obviously think the Giants won the trade, but I gave it a C because, well, one, Toney has barely seen the field this season and barely even been available for much of his career to this point. But I also gave it a C because there is a lot of upside here. And you gave away a 3rd round pick and a 6th round pick, which is some decent draft capital for a guy that really hasn't even played. But I think there's a world where Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are the two guys that can unlock Toney to be an absolute stud and everything we could have imagined him being. So for that matter, I gave it a C where I hedged my bets on both sides. I didn't think it was an elite trade. I didn't think it was a terrible trade. It made some sort of sense, but I don't know who exactly you were competing with in the trade market for Kadarius Toney. So I didn't exactly think it should have costed that much, but as a Giant fan, very happy that it costed that much. And I do believe that they probably will unlock Toney, but I'm giving it a C based off the simple fact that when does he see the field? Now we move on to deadline day, and this is where things got absolutely insane. It made absolutely no sense how the NFL just turned into the NBA for a day, and some people were thinking that it was going to be a very underwhelming trade deadline because of the fact that, well, so many guys were thought to be traded, but the NFL never legitimately makes trades like that, and then everything blew up. Granted, some of the big names that we expected to be traded and some of the teams that we expected to make more moves, looking at you, Packers, did not make moves and did not get traded. So DJ Moore being another guy that comes to mind as well. Jerry Jeudy being one, as well as a bunch of other players as well. But Brandon Cooks, another. Still, so many names were moved. Such an active trade deadline, and it was super entertaining to watch unfold as my phone just continued blowing up one after another. Group chats going crazy, like, yo, what the fuck is going on? And then obviously I had a bunch of stuff to break down. So it was a crazy deadline day, and the first trade that really popped off and went crazy this was a hell of a way to start it. The Ravens got Roquan Smith. And as for the Ravens, obviously, yes, they received Roquan Smith, and I gave this an A because it's a team that's very middle of the pack as of right now in run defense and has very much struggled against the pass. And in case you didn't know, Roquan Smith leads the entire league in tackles this season and is second since he got drafted to, I believe, only Bobby Wagner. I think that's the stat that I saw. So Roquan Smith is absolutely dominant, and for that matter, really doesn't have a flaw in his game. He's only allowed, I believe, a 72.6 passer rating and coverage, so he's an elite cover linebacker as well. There isn't much of a weakness in Roquan's game, and he's going to help the Baltimore defense on both levels. He will be able to play elite zone coverage at the linebacker spot, maybe even match up with some tight ends. He's a very athletic sideline-to-sideline guy, so it should be a super interesting trade for them as they gain one of the best tacklers in the league and one of the best pass coverage linebackers in the entire league as well. Ravens made a great move here, and costed them a decent amount, but not enough to where it really equated to Roquan Smith. As for the Bears, they received a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick in this year's draft. I gave it a B, and I only gave it a B because he's a free agent after this offseason, and yes, they are rebuilding, but I gave it a B and not higher because of the fact that he's still only 25 years old, and you are a rebuilding team, but eventually you got to pay some of the guys, and you still have Fields on his rookie contract, so you could afford to pay a guy like Roquan Smith, but now you have over $100 million in cap space next offseason, and I don't really know exactly who you're going to spend it on, as it's really not an inspiring offensive line or wide receiver group in free agency, I don't believe. But anyways, I mean, look, you got a second-round pick and a fifth-round pick out of it, which decent draft compensation for a guy who's going to be a free agent and really didn't seem like he wanted to be there all that much anymore. So getting a second is decent. Hopefully they use that pick in this year's draft to get some goddamn help for Justin Fields because the dude, one, is running for his life, and two, didn't really have receivers. So that actually gives me the perfect transition as I segue into the other trade that the Bears decided to make, and that was getting Chase Claypool, as the Steelers received the second-round pick in 2023's draft, and I gave it an A for the Steelers because, well, you already have Pickens, you already have Deontay, and you already have Pat Freiermuth, which are three great weapons in the passing game. That's just to start. Not to mention that the Steelers develop wide receivers like it's nothing. They just turn out number 2 and number 1 wide receivers like it's absolutely nothing. So I'm sure you'll draft one in the 4th round this year, and he'll become an absolute stud, and you won't even remember that Chase Claypool was a receiver for your team. Not to mention that he really wasn't involved. He was their number 3 receiver, arguably sometimes their number 4 target, including Freiermuth. So you got a second-round pick for a guy that wasn't even involved in your offense, and you develop wide receivers like they're nothing. That's a W. The Bears received Chase Claypool, obviously, and I gave it a B- for them. I gave it a B- because obviously, yes, you've seen enough of Chase Claypool to know that he can be a dynamic weapon, and when given the actual opportunity, he has been good. He has been arguably very good in his career. He's a massive target. He could stretch the field as well. Huge get for the Bears, huge get for Justin Fields, which I understand why they got him. It was just a very expensive price for a receiver that you're essentially going to have to pay in a year and a half, and second-round pick for a guy that wasn't even involved in the offense is kind of iffy. But, yes, you needed him. That's pretty obvious. You needed a guy like Chase Claypool to pair with Darnell Mooney for Justin Fields because Justin Fields really needed help, as I said. Not only did Justin Fields need help, the front office needed help to evaluate Justin Fields, and in order to fairly evaluate Justin Fields, you needed another weapon. So thank God they're getting Justin Fields some help over there. Definitely deserves it. But B-, just a little bit too much compensation, a little too high of a pick for me, but you got him, and you got to be happy with that. I think probably the most surprising move of the deadline was TJ Hockenson getting traded to the Minnesota Vikings. It was either this one or a trade that I'm going to cover in a few minutes, but TJ Hockenson getting traded to the Vikings was not something I expected to see, and the Vikings received TJ Hawkinson, obviously, a 4th-round pick in 2023 and a conditional 4th-round pick in 2024. And I gave the Vikings an A+ for this trade. And it was well-deserved because, well, the Vikings haven't had a tight end in their offense that's actually capable like TJ Hawkinson in a very long time. And, well, not to mention that Kevin O'Connell's offense kind of requires a tight end that is very capable of doing a lot because they like to heavily involve them. As you could see with the Rams and Tyler Higbee, they do like to involve their tight end. So TJ Hawkinson not only improves your passing game, it improves your run game as well because he is one of the best run-blocking tight ends in the entire league. So he's a dual-threat tight end that can dominate the run game and dominate in the passing game. He's a great underneath target. He'll create yards after the catch. After the first few games of the season, he's as sure-handed as can be. But he'll fit right in. It won't even take him all that long, I don't think, to learn this offense. And, well, once he's going, it'll be a top 5 offense in the league. They're currently ranked 10th in the NFL right now, but I think that once he gets going, once he gets acclimated to the system, they will finish the season as a top 5 offense. And TJ Hawkinson will help them immensely as the underneath target, as Thielen works the boundary and Justin Jefferson just gets open on every single play. So you're not going to be able to guard them. So the Lions received a 2nd-round pick and a 4th-round pick in this year's draft, and I gave this a D. I understand that you only had him for one more year, which after the season would be the 5th-year option, but if you planned on getting a new quarterback, what's a quarterback's best friend? It's especially a young quarterback, their best friend is the tight end. And getting rid of TJ Hawkinson, who is one of the 5 or 6 best tight ends in the NFL, will not help the development of a future quarterback for you. If he was on your team long term, you definitely could have afforded to pay him, especially if you ended up getting a guy on a rookie contract. Now you don't have that safety valve for that future quarterback, and that hurts. And I do understand that the Lions were not going to win anything this year, but you also did give up 4th-round picks, and while one of them was a pick swap, and the Vikings got the better of those 2 picks for this season, I don't think the locker room is going to love this move because under Dan Campbell, you've been competitive in most games, and TJ Hawkinson, from all accounts, is one of the locker room leaders. So I just don't know how it's going to go over in the locker room as you're kind of waving the white flag. And yes, you weren't going to win anything this season, but TJ Hawkinson would have helped in the future for a young rookie quarterback. So gave it a D. Don't like it. Don't like it for the Lions at all, even though you got a 2nd-round pick. So this was the move with the most compensation for a deadline day move, and that was Bradley Chubb getting traded to the Miami Dolphins. So the Broncos received a 1st in this year's draft, a 4th in 2024's draft, and Chase Edmonds. So I gave this a B- for the Broncos because, well, you got a 1st, which is cool, I guess, and a 4th-round pick in 2024, which is also cool, I guess. But at the same time, you were supposed to be competing this year. And I guess, in a way, this is a good thing because you're very self-aware that you're not going to be competing this year. And you get a 1st-round pick because, well, you needed to pay Bradley Chubb immense amounts of money, and it doesn't exactly seem like your roster is ready for that. But you're giving up an elite edge rusher when healthy, and I have to stress when healthy because Chubb has spent good portions of his career injured. You are giving up an elite edge rusher, and no matter what you were getting in return, that definitely hurts because, well, every team is looking for that. It's definitely a tough pill to swallow, but you have elite depth at that position, and you just swung a trade for Jacob Martin on the deadline day as well. So you have 4 or 5 capable edge rushers in that rotation still, so it made sense in a way to recoup a 1st-round pick and possibly draft someone with that can help you in the future as well for a much cheaper contract nonetheless. But still, getting rid of a elite edge rusher when you're supposed to be a winning team hurts. That will always be a tough pill to swallow. So the Dolphins got a Chubb, and for that, I give them a B+. It was a decently hefty price to pay for a edge rusher that gets hurt pretty often. And that's scary, for sure, giving up a 1st-round pick for a guy that doesn't stay healthy all that often. But still, well worth the price. Why? Because you are now getting into the category of Super Bowl contender, and you knew that. When Tua's been healthy, I believe you're 5-1. So this is a very good football team now with a star-studded defense, again, when completely healthy. So obviously you have your elite offense with the track team of receivers and then a star-studded defense that the only missing piece was an elite edge rusher. And now you have a very good rotation there, which is led by the star in Bradley Chubb now, who's having a fantastic season. Not to mention, they already extended him. It was a crazy deal, a big money deal for Bradley Chubb, and a well-deserved big money deal for Bradley Chubb because he's absolutely balling out this year. But it makes the compensation more worth it, and it makes it hurt less because of the fact that you already extended him right after you traded him. So you have no worries about losing him to free agency, as if that was a worry in the first place. But got the guy, extended him, and he might be the missing piece on that defense to make it elite. So the last massive trade of the day, and this was the other one I was talking about that was absolutely surprising, and I did not see this coming. Maybe should have seen it coming, but it's Calvin Ridley to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So we'll start with Atlanta's side of things, and this is where it's very complicated. So Atlanta received a heavily conditional draft pick that can be as high as a second-round pick if he signs a long-term deal, as low as a sixth-round pick if he remains banned from the NFL. It could be a fifth if he's simply reinstated to the NFL, a fourth if he makes the team, and a third if he meets playing time threshold. So most likely, this is going to be a second-round pick. So I gave Atlanta a B. And the reason I gave Atlanta a B was because I don't exactly know what this trade is going to end up being for them. And it didn't seem like Ridley was ever going to suit up for the Atlanta Falcons again in his career. So to get anything for the guy is a plus. If this is a sixth-round pick, that means he wasn't reinstated to the league and you got something for him. If he is reinstated and signs a long-term deal, you got a second-round pick. But the issue there, and this is why I gave it a B, he's borderline top 10 wide receiver in the NFL when he's on the field. So only getting a second-round pick off of a receiver that's borderline top 10, especially with what all the other receivers are commanding on the trade market, is a difficult pill to swallow. And not one that I'd be very happy with in the end. Granted, it is a second-round pick for a guy that didn't want to suit up for the organization again, but the grade still takes a hit because, well, trading a top 10 wide receiver for just the second-round pick is a tough pill to swallow, especially with what all the other receivers are going for. So Jacksonville obviously receives Ridley. Well, I gave this an A+. Jacksonville gambled on Calvin Ridley, and it might pay off. So, if he re-signs to a long-term deal after he is reinstated, you're only giving up a second-round pick. As I just said, if you look at what the wide receiver market has been recently, all of the borderline top 10 wide receivers have been going for a first-round pick and then some. So, to get a guy that is a borderline top 10 wide receiver and will make life easier on every other receiver in your offense, and will give you a very fair evaluation of what type of quarterback Trevor Lawrence is, a second-round pick is an easy price to pay for that. And it's not even close. Obviously, it's a gamble, for sure. You need to roll the dice a little bit on him and maybe bet on yourself, bet on your team. But anyways, I mean, if he never plays again, a 6 is nothing. A 6 is absolutely nothing. Doesn't cost you much of anything because, well, that pick probably won't turn into anything of substance anyways. So it's well worth the risk. And if it does work out, a second-round pick is absolutely nothing, as I just said. So that's really it for the big-time trades. We'll just cover a couple of the smaller ones. Obviously, Jeff Wilson got traded to the Dolphins for a 5th-round pick. I gave both teams a B because, well, it was kind of a negligible trade that could have some decent ramifications for the Dolphins. And to get anything for a guy that was essentially going to be your third-string running back when Elijah Mitchell comes back is a decent amount for the 49ers. So Dolphins got the old band back together with Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert, the most injury-prone backfield in NFL history. But when both are healthy, those two are a decent duo and will improve the ground game immensely for the Miami Dolphins. The Steelers get William Jackson from the Commanders, and the Commanders received a conditional 6th-round pick in 2025. I gave it a C for the Commanders. It's better than nothing for a player you were probably going to release anyway who didn't want to be there. And as for the Steelers, they got William Jackson in a conditional 7th in 2025, so I gave it a B+. It's a corner that belongs in a more man-heavy scheme. William Jackson even made that apparent. Didn't fit the scheme. He said it himself. And the Steelers typically do prefer to play man coverage, quite often actually. So if they extend him, it's a massive W. They got a good corner for essentially nothing. And we've seen that in the past he's been a very, very, very capable corner that is arguably elite in man coverage. So big win for the Steelers on this trade. Kind of whatever for the Commanders. The last two trades, and they really didn't have much impact, but it could have some impact on the Buffalo Bills, and one of them is Nyheim Hines to Buffalo for Zach Moss and a conditional 6th-round pick in this year's draft. So Nyheim Hines is the type of player that Buffalo's been looking for a while, so I kind of had to give this an A+. He's going to be the backup to Devin Singletary, yes, but the Buffalo Bills have been looking for a pass-catching back, legitimate pass-catching back for a while, and he's essentially what you kind of wanted James Cook to be this year. So to give up a conditional 6th-round pick and Zach Moss, who really wasn't playing for you anyways, for a guy that is very capable in the passing game and a good pass protector because he understands assignments, exactly like I said, the guy that you wanted. So no doubt it's worth the price for a team that's going to compete for a Super Bowl and only got better. As for Indianapolis, kind of a C. It's really nothing to me, but they did right by Nyheim Hines because he wanted out. So I guess a C+ for that. Anyways, like, subscribe, press that notification bell. Innocent Bystander podcast, go watch all those. Go watch my last video on the New York Yankees off-season plans, or at least what I think would be the ideal off-season for the New York Yankees. And go watch the Ball Game podcast. We live stream from 9:30 to 11:30 every Friday morning. And we've been releasing YouTube clips and TikToks almost on the daily in between every week. And we are, you know what? I'm not going to reveal anything on the Ball Game podcast. That's all I'm going to say for now. Big things are in the future with the podcast. Also, might be a little switch up to my podcast soon enough, so stay tuned for that as well. Lastly, follow me on all my socials. It's going to be linked in the description. And follow Ball Game on all our socials, also linked in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really appreciate it. If you have any thoughts, reactions, just hit me up. Hit me up on Instagram, text me, whatever. I don't care. Just reach out to me.